Are you preparing to sell your home in Texas, but you know that you need to be able to have the money from the sale of your property prior to purchasing a new home? Guess what? There is a solution for that, and that's something that I'm going to explain today. I'm Amy Brossette with Keller Williams in Austin, Texas. And this is something that's common. It's a common question. What is a seller's lease back or a seller's temporary lease? And why would I want to do this? And of course, the whys depend on who you are. Are you the buyer or the seller? First off, what is a seller's temporary lease? That is when a buyer and seller, go ahead and they close on the property, the buyer purchases the property, and the seller retains the right to stay living in the property for a set period of time. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, it depends. Are you the buyer or the seller? From a seller's standpoint, you would want to do this from what I mentioned before. Do you need to sell your home before you can purchase a new home? Well, if it's a buyer's market, you really need to have all your proceeds first before you even try and buy a new house. And from another benefit for a seller would be that they can go to closing and they haven't had to move at all. They haven't had to even pack, depending on how long the lease back is. And after the property has been sold, money has transferred, then in full confidence from the seller's standpoint that this purchase is actually going to happen, you get to then move. Now, from a buyer's standpoint, why would a buyer want to do this? Several reasons. Are you in multiple offers? Offer this option to the seller for free, and you can beat out other buyers that aren't as flexible. Or are you moving from another state and you want to go in advance? Maybe you want to make a home purchase a month or two prior to even needing to move, so that you have a peace of mind that you are going to have the property that you really like ready and waiting for you when it is time to move. But you don't want to have a vacant home sitting there that's at your cost and your responsibility to maintain when you are living out of state. Well, if the seller gets to stay living there during that time, then the seller's in charge of maintaining it, and they can also pay for the amount of days that they are living in the property. Now that we know reasons, benefits for both buyer and seller, that a seller's leaseback can be a win-win situation, let's talk about some of the most important terms of a seller's leaseback in Texas. First, does the seller pay to live there? It depends on how it's negotiated. As I mentioned, if that buyer is in multiple offers, they might give it for free during that leaseback and allow the seller to live there. I've had sellers that have gotten 2 months, 2.5 months free of living in the house after the property has already been purchased. Or the seller can pay a prorated amount that would be based on either the local rents in that area, or it could be based on how much is the buyer going to be spending every day to own that house while they're not living there. Or it could be based on any amount that as the buyer and seller as they negotiate. Another item, from a buyer's standpoint, who would now be the landlord, they would want to have a security deposit. This can help ensure that the property is at the end of the lease in the same condition it was at the beginning of the lease. And within 30 days of the end of that seller lease, that security deposit is sent back to the seller. Now, Another term that's important to the buyer especially is the holdover amount. What is a holdover amount? A holdover amount is any day after the expiration of the lease that the seller is still in the property, the amount of that daily rent changes. Now, from a buyer standpoint, if you are my client, I'm going to want you to have that rate at least double, if not triple. I want to make that daily rate of the holdover amount increase so much so that it's not even a consideration for the seller to stay longer than that agreed upon lease. Also, other important terms. The seller is still responsible for paying for all the utilities, and then property condition and maintenance. The seller is still responsible for maintaining that property just like if they were the owner. They are responsible for grass and trees and watering the lawn and making sure that the inside of the property remains at the same condition it was at the onset of the lease. Now, what happens if, let's say, in the process of moving, the movers drag something across the wood floors and they put a 3-foot scratch in it, gouge in it? Well, that's not normal wear and tear. And so as the seller, who's now the tenant, they would be responsible for having that repaired. And what if it's something that is a casualty loss? What if it's a fire, a hail damage? Well, then that would go on the new homeowner's home insurance, which brings me to another topic. Homeowner's insurance. Okay, so new owner who was the buyer is now the owner and now the landlord. You need to have your homeowner's insurance in place at the very beginning, just like you would if you were taking possession and moving in. And as the the seller, now tenant, is going to have their insurance to insure all of the contents on the property. And for more detailed information about homeowners insurance during a seller's lease, you should talk to your insurance agent because they can give you all the details and recommendations on that. So, as you can see, there are a lot of reasons why a seller or a buyer might find it beneficial to have a seller's short-term temporary lease. If you like this video or found it helpful, like it. And if you want to know more options on, as a buyer, how can you help win out multiple offers, make sure you subscribe and check out some of my other YouTube videos on that topic.